Birdwatchers. I'm Nikhil Mehta. This is Daniel Rotter. We're excited to be back with you for another episode. I think we last recorded ours right around 2 weeks ago, something in that range. And it has not been a great 2 weeks of bird watching. The Orioles have, I'm trying to pull up their last 15 record. It just ran away from me. The Orioles have not played that well in their last 15 games. I think they dropped series um, to the Rays, to the Red Sox, and to the Tigers, all on this pretty long road trip. This this pretty long road trip that started at or I'm sorry, this wasn't a long road trip. They just came off a long road trip to Boston and Detroit, but they were at home versus Tampa Bay and the White Sox before that. Couldn't even sweep the White Sox. Took two games to them, and those two games on the second and third, Daniel, I really felt like it was like, all right, they needed it against the White Sox. It was kind of a get right series. And then they dropped the third game 1-8, and you're just like, you just went right back to where you were where you started. So what have your thoughts been on the last 2 weeks of the Orioles before we get into our specific topics today?
Yeah, well, it's been an offensive issue for the past, month or so, but those issues have really made themselves very prevalent over the past 10 games. And I mean, we're 3-7 in the past 10, as you mentioned. These struggles of dropping our past three series. In those 10 games, we have scored over 3 runs twice. We've scored over 4 runs once, and we have not scored over 5 runs. And with as much talk about our pitching being so banged up, our pitching's been pretty good. I mean, we've had, I think, three of the 10 games we've had some blowups and we've given up 7 or more runs. But other than that, our pitching has really been keeping us in games, and the offense has just been anemic. And everyone knows that. I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record just saying it, but it's just hard to pinpoint what happened. I mean, this team was so energetic, electric, chomping at the bit to get after it on offense. Really, since Adley's debut, we've been so spoiled in 2022. Like, it's been 2 years where we have seen a really motivated and almost like unsustainable like excitement. They can't stay this exciting forever, but I mean, they're really swooning as a group right now. And gosh, I mean, without Gunnar, we would be on a 4-game skid. I mean, we would have gotten swept in Detroit. We would have gotten swept in Detroit and lost that Saturday game if we didn't have Gunnar for sure.
Yeah, and actually we can switch around our topics and start with, what seems to be the biggest issue for this offense, which is, them batting with runners in scoring position. I was looking at some of their stats that, their batting average for runners in scoring position is 249, which is on the low side. Their OBP is just 312, which is sixth worst in Major League Baseball. But their I think 429 slugging percentage with runners in scoring position is top 10. They had an 0 for 7 day on September 15th with runners, or yesterday they had an 0 for 7 setch with runners in scoring position. They went on a 1 for 20 with runners in scoring position run last week. And they didn't get a single extra base hit with runners in scoring position in 9 games preceding yesterday's game. So the kind of way I look at this, and this is something that the hitting coach Ryan Fuller talked about before the game yesterday, which is, they were successful with runners in scoring position earlier in the season. Like, they were a very good hitting team with 2 strikes with runners in scoring position. I think the stats I just outlined, the batting average, the OBP, but the top 10 slugging, is very much reminiscent of just an over aggressive approach, trying to bring in everyone, on the base paths with runners in the scoring position instead of keeping rallies going. That OBP is really low because it feels like I rarely see Orioles walk with runners in scoring position, and their refusal to take pitches and walk with runners in scoring position is emboldening opposing pitchers to, be more aggressive and, really nibble at the corners more, and they're just swinging at pitches out of the zone. So I think just a sense of just relaxing and remembering like how you got here is really important for this team. It just feels like they're pushing so much right now.
Yeah, and I really don't even think like when I think of the hitting struggles specifically that it's only with runners in scoring position, because it feels like even with bases empty, like we're just having trouble driving the ball and hitting it at optimal launch angles. Like there's just been so many. I mean, my mind just goes back to this Detroit series because it was the most recent one. But there were so many double plays, and so a lot of them had a high expected batting average. But we're hitting them, we're beating them into the ground, balls that could be hard line drives in the gap. If we're getting a little more under them, and I don't know, what exactly the message has been that has led to this seemingly like large drop off in gap to gap power, like line drives into the gap and such. But I mean, it's just tough. And I mean, it got really, really, put under the microscope in that game on Friday when we were facing a group of Tigers pitchers that, man, I mean, Brennan Hanafy was an Oriole, but other than that, I bet Orioles fans don't even know who any of these pitchers were that almost no hit us. Like we had, sorry, I need to look up his first name, Brant Herter. I mean, we made him look like prime sale out there because we just are having so much trouble just approaching at bats from the lens of I'm going to, try and hit a hard line drive somewhere. And I mean, it's just been tough to watch. And I don't think it's exclusive to runners in scoring position. And really the only one who seems like they are squaring the ball up is our elite barrel rate guy, Gunner. Like everyone else, it has just been a massive struggle in every sense hitting.
Yeah, something that, and I suddenly can't find it. I'll see if I can. Oh, here we go. Among Orioles with at least 20 plate appearances with runners in scoring position, four of the top five, and Heston's back, I know, but are injured now. Three of the top five. Kerstad, of course, that's a small sample size. Arias at 317, Mountcastle at 280, and Westberg at 270. So you're also losing guys that have done really well for runners in scoring position. Mountcastle and Westberg, two of those, gap to gap power guys that you're talking about. And so, yeah, there are injuries, but to me, I think all these injuries mounting means you have to take a different approach where you're not having necessarily as explosive rallies and you have to be more willing to. I don't mean manufacture runs, but I mean like bunting. I mean just being more willing to take pitches and get pitches that you can do more with instead of trying to bring a runner home from first. Just keep the inning going when you don't have, you're not working the power gaps. We talked a lot about Adley last episode. He's been playing about the same. It's felt like since we talked about him, he had his first home run in a little while the other day, but still no turnaround from him. Looking at I had the rest of the team's last 15 up, and it was pretty miserable. You had a number of guys up towards the top. Gunner, Santander. I'm pulling it up right now. In the last 15, Gunner's batting 340. You've got Mullins at 325, Santander at 256, Rivera, and I believe Soto's only has 7 at bats. Rivera's batted pretty well actually with all the play he's getting. He's batting 276. But then it's like Rushman, Cowser, 222, 214, Holiday, 125, Mayo, 63, and O'Hearn now down to 143 in his last 15. And so you're just seeing so little offensive production out of bats that you ideally want in your lineup every day. I mean, that's just and that's just not like that much of your lineup being not a black hole, but such a negative. It's hard to put a lineup together around those guys. It's hard to come up with your 9 and say, okay, here's how I'm going to balance my lineup to make sure that we don't just have two dead half innings every 3 innings because Gunner's not batting. So again, I know we're saying all this, and I think one of the changes that has needed to come for a while is just a more patient approach at the plate, especially with runners in scoring position. Just feels like they're trying to jump all over a lot of pitches now early in counts. Some of that aggression we're even seeing from Adley that we're not used to seeing. And so that's probably my main takeaway. Daniel, you've played a lot more baseball than me. Do you think that there's anything I'm missing in terms of runners in scoring position here?
Well, I guess, there is a little bit of a mentality shift when you're hitting with runners in scoring position, seemingly, but also to these guys, I would have to imagine their approach is largely the same. I mean, I don't think that we play the game the same way that it was played. I say we as if I'm in the MLB. I don't think they play the game as much as as much as they did in the 80s, in the sense they're the 70s that, I just need to lay down a bunt or get a knock or do whatever I can. Like, no, they're still looking to barrel the ball up and get an extra base hit, almost, bases empty or runners on. So I don't think that that is changing their approach too much. But like you were saying with the lineup, man, it does feel like a black hole. There's a lot of spots in this lineup that we are just not getting any production from. I mean, Rutschman's been tough. O'Hearn has been struggling. Jimenez has been struggling. Cowser, I still believe in the barrels, but I think he's going to be a pretty streaky player, at least, as he's getting more seasoned over the next couple of years. And then Rivera has been a pleasant surprise, but I mean, he's not very good. And Holiday, I think that we've all essentially written off productivity from Holiday this year. It's just not going to happen. I mean, he's a solid defender, which is going to keep him in there, but I just don't think you can expect really anything with the bat. And then there's nothing to bring off the bench right now, unless you believe in the Levon Soto 2-for-4 game that we had on Saturday.
Right.
But man, I mean, it's been tough to watch, and it almost gives me a little bit of hope that they can't stay this down for long, right? Maybe we'll heat up in the playoffs.
Yeah, there's and again we can I want to talk about Corbin Burrows, but I think we can come back to that because that's a nice segue to one of our other topics, which is their playoff chances. And it's been a rough week for sports in Baltimore. Ravens lost on Sunday as well. And a lot of people, particularly on social media, it's very, very doom and gloom. Even walking out of the stadium on Sunday, I heard someone say, "Oh, it's a terrible time to be a sports fan in Baltimore," which that's a good one. I don't understand how you have that approach with this much talent. I get the frustration, absolutely. But you've got two competitive teams that are going to be competitive for the next couple of years. There are cities that would kill for that. So just for context, Fangraphs and Baseball Reference both have the Orioles playoff chances at over 99%. Now their chances of winning the division have fallen significantly. Fangraphs, it's just 11.7%. On Baseball Reference, it's just 15.5%. So the division feels like it's kind of out of reach. I really put that to the Orioles 41-38 record against teams over 500. The Yankees against teams over 500 are 51-33. So that tells me two things. One, I still don't think the Orioles have beat up on bad teams enough. Like they took 2 or 3 from the Sox. They lost a series to the Tigers. Like they need to do better against some of these teams that are just, below 500 or close to it. So that's one thing. But two, that record against teams above 500 has me a little worried for the playoffs because they're going to make the playoffs. It's almost certain to make the playoffs. They have a very good chance of being the top wild card team. Currently, what are they? Three games behind the Yankees, which feels pretty tough to do with 2 weeks to go. But they are 4.5 games up on the Twins, 2 games up on the Royals in the AL wildcard race. So they are likely to secure that top wildcard seed and get a home playoff game. That all feels great. I think that is, but I think because of how last season went, and you hinted it, and you mentioned this earlier in the pod, because of how last season went, because of some of the meteoric rise of this team over the last 2 years, the expectation is not just to make the playoffs, but win the division and or win a playoff series, get to the championship series, get to the World Series. This team as it is doesn't feel like they're going to do that. Now, like you said, there is some hope for some regression back to the mean for this team, for regressing positively and with runners in scoring position. But then I also worry about pitching regressing negatively because it feels like this season they've never been able to have the two on the same page. They've done very well in spite of that. I don't think anyone would look at this season and say it's not a success, especially with the injuries that they've dealt with, but it's certainly not all this team could do. I definitely felt like there was a feeling April, May-ish, early May, where it was like, they're doing pretty well, but we really haven't seen what this team can do yet. And then May and June, we really were like, all right, this is the Orioles we have for the rest of the season. This is the best version of this team. And we have not seen that version since. So that has its downsides, obviously, in their record and not winning the division. It does mean that there's still a chance that we can see the best version of this team in the playoffs. We know MLB playoffs is all about getting hot at the right time. And the Orioles have 2 weeks to do that.
Yeah, I've been saying all year, I don't care what seed we are in the playoffs this year. I don't care if we're the number 1 seed or not. And I think there are a lot of things that are still up in the air. being 3 games back of the Yankees. I think the only way we win the division is if we sweep them. I mean, I don't see them collapsing on their own without us sweeping them so that we can take the division. So I think if we end up being the number 1 seed, that's our route, and we can kind of take control of our own destiny there. But probably unlikely. And then with the Royals only being 2 games back of us, they've been playing really good baseball. They have good pitching. They have an electrifying superstar, and you know what? There's a non-zero chance that we're going on the road in the wild card round to Kansas City. And, Baltimore sports fan myself here, just like you, God, if we lose another important series to Kansas City or another big game, that would really suck.
I will lose my mind also.
Yeah, but there just seems like a lot of uncertainty around where we'll be in the playoffs, but we'll be in. And ultimately, again, what I've been saying is just the first round bye doesn't mean that much to me, because if we lose in the wild card round, we probably weren't going to win the World Series anyways.
Right.
That's kind of been my main shtick. So, let's win some playoff games. I don't care who they're against, where they are, what seed we are. Couldn't care less. All that matters is that we get in and we get hot, just like you said. And that's what the MLB playoffs is all about. The Diamondbacks last year were the last seed in the NL playoffs. The Rangers were the 5 seed in the AL playoffs. 2 years ago, the Phillies were the last seed in the NL playoffs. Those 3 teams all made those World Series. So it doesn't matter what seed you are. Win the games.
Preach, Daniel. Preach. I couldn't agree more. That is absolutely what they need to do. Looking at their schedule, right? They've got a 3-game series against the Giants starting tomorrow, a 3-game series against the Tigers, both at home, 6 games at home. They need to. I mean, they need to win both these series. Getting a sweep against one of these 2 teams would be nice. The Tigers are out of the playoff race. Looking to play spoiler. The Giants way also out of the playoff race. So what you're really hoping is get a sweep of one of these series. If you can get a sweep of one of these series and go barreling into New York, New York schedule, I was just pulling that up too. They have the Mariners for 3 games. They're in Oakland. So they're in Oakland, in Seattle. Then they're at home against the Orioles, and then they're at home against Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh out of the playoffs, right? And then they're also playing a Mariners team that is fighting also to maybe get a wild card spot, although they're very much on the outside looking in. That to me feels like you said, it's really going to come down to that series, because all 3 of those series for the other series for both teams are pretty winnable. The Orioles finish off against the Twins, another playoff hopeful team. So both teams are playing a couple teams they should beat. Both teams are playing one playoff hopeful that hopefully, the Mariners can give the Yankees a good series, and then they're playing each other. It comes down to that series in New York. And they've played New York well when they've played New York. I felt like it feels like they kind of playing New York brings it out of them. They really sweeping that series means more than just the division. It's also them getting hot at the right time. It's also giving them that confidence. Not necessarily going into Minnesota and relying on a sweep there to win a division, like giving yourself, like you said, a little more control of your destiny. Make the playoffs. Great. We're there, and one of the big pieces of the Orioles playoff hopes has really rounded into form in the first 2 weeks of September here. I'm talking about Corbin Burnes. There were some concerns about his August. His August had a rough August, 21 earned runs, a 7.36 ERA in August. Just a really tough month for him. It was one of the worst months I can remember of Corbin Burnes in recent memory. It's rare that you see him string together so many rough starts. He had 5 or more runs allowed in all of those starts, not earned runs, but runs allowed in all but one of those starts. He has 3 starts so far here in September. He has allowed a total of 3 earned runs in 18 innings. Feels like Corbin's back. Seems like the kind of guy who would watch all this film from August and figure out what he was doing wrong and get it fixed pretty quickly. It doesn't really surprise me that he came back like this. What have you seen from Corbin over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think just watching the game, a little bit of just, observational point, he looked motivated in that game on Saturday. I mean, there was a different look in his eye, the way he was reacting to those strikeouts. I was like, oh, he kind of had that opening day look where he had something to prove, and you could tell. So that was awesome to see. And I mean, he was just in complete control. They were talking about his breaking ball. I think there wasn't even a single batter who made contact with his breaking ball. I think it generated like eight whiffs or something on the curve. I don't remember which breaking ball exactly it was, but I heard that mentioned on the broadcast. And also, this was something that I noticed. This was his first start in almost 2 months where he had gone more than 4 innings and struck out a batter per inning at least. So that's something that's been huge for me. And I keep saying this with Burns is that the strikeouts have been down, which is what always worried me about a little bit of regression because he is just giving up a lot of balls in play. And that does lead itself to more unluckiness to happen.
And that
So
has happened to him.
yeah, it has absolutely, and especially if you've seen it in some of those August starts, like um, versus Houston, he had 2 strikeouts in 5 2/3 innings, and it's no wonder you give up 5 runs in that start against a good lineup because if you let them put balls in play, a lot of those balls are going to have a good chance to fall for a hit. So, I mean, if he can miss bats, I think teams are going to have a lot of trouble with him, and I really think that that's all it comes down to. Like, I don't think I would be surprised if he turns in a clunker in the postseason either way, because I do think he kind of has that bulldog mentality out there. Like he's not easily phased. But I mean, the difference between a fringy quality start and an electrifying start is he striking out a batter per inning for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, and I think it's this Corbin that we need to see in the playoffs. His just the state of the pitching staff, how a lot of other guys are just going to be very hit or miss depending on their start. Um, Suarez up and down, Kramer up and down like that. Um, if you don't if you're not getting consistent starting pitching elsewhere in the playoffs, you really need those 2 games a series, those 2 or 3 games a series where Corbin can come in and shut him down. Because it also takes the pressure off your offense for a night. Like they're gonna have off nights in the playoffs. It's gonna happen, hopefully not that often, but having Corbin on the bump, in a playoff game just gives you so much more confidence in not just that game, but in the series. Because you can be like, all right, we can not that bats can take the night off or anything like that, but you feel more comfortable that you're going to win that game regardless and give yourself some momentum heading into the next game. And I think that's a big part of what the Orioles will need in the playoffs is momentum and building game to game.
And saving our bullpen, which is going to be pretty patched together in the playoffs. I mean, there's not a single pitcher that will come into the game that I will think, yeah, we're safe this inning in the
Yeah.
playoffs. There's not. I mean, Sir Anthony Dominguez has been serving up solo home runs. It's only a matter of time before there's runners on base for one of those. And Cano, fine. I mean, he has his little instances where he kind of like gets in his own head and he can't throw a strike, and those are always a little bit worrisome. Webb, I mean, good, fine. Peripherals don't indicate that he's an elite reliever, but he's been doing a good job this year. And Coulomb, hopefully he comes back and he's effective. But if Burns could go deep into the game, which I think if he is, being efficient and striking guys out, he can. That would also set up our bullpen nicely for some of those other games in a postseason series.
Yeah. I think Cano is the one guy that I trust the most. Um, but like you said, everyone has that quality that is that everyone has a different way they fall apart. It feels like where Cano, it's not throwing strikes. Dominguez, it's the home runs. Kimbrel, it's just everything falls apart at once. So getting those quality starts out of Corbin, something out of, and I'm honestly blanking on our half of rotation right now because of injuries. Corbin and Eflin. Eflin has also, been very good since he came to Baltimore. If you can get 2 good starts out of those guys, if you can get like a combined, I don't know, 13 or 14 innings and 4 runs or something like that from them across starts in the playoffs, you're in great shape. You can win those games. You can win 2 games and, rely on your bullpen more in other games. So you said it earlier on, the pitching you don't feel as bad about. Burns is back. Eflin's been great. Between Kramer and Suarez, you hope one of them basically can pull out a decent start when they're pitching between the two of them on any given day. And you can work with that, but you can't do it with batting the way that you are, and that really just takes this team getting hot. There's been talk of, I think there there needs to be some leadership, and I'm not necessarily looking for it from high. I think I'm looking for it from the players too. I haven't seen anything about this, about getting like a players only meeting, something like that, where they're in, vent your frustration. If you're frustrated with the coaches, I'm really looking for someone like Adley, maybe like an O'Hearn or a McCann to take the initiative and be like, hey, like this is not okay. Now again, they may have done this already and they just haven't told the media about it. It's usually the kind of thing a team likes to tell the media though, because it makes everyone feel better. But it means something when these guys are all professionals and they're there together. Like just like some of it's venting, some of it's frustration. Get it out and address it, because right now it feels like it's just simmering and simmering, and every now and then they'll have a good game and that'll put it off for a day or two and then it's back again.
That kind of reminds me of something that I heard on MLB Network when we were facing the Angels on opening weekend. And they had that team meeting 2 games into the season. And oh man, I don't remember whose quote it was, but somebody on MLB Network said, good teams don't have meetings. But guess what? We have not been a good team. Something needs to be addressed. I agree. And the fans keep clamoring, just like they do for Harbaugh, that hides the problem. He needs to be out, this, that, and the other. And I just have a hard time believing that, man. This team has always played hard for Hyde. Like I think that, I don't know what it is. There has to just be something that reinvigorates this team's youthfulness and excitement. Like I've mentioned this on our podcast before. There's just some kind of intangible thing that the Orioles have had over the past 2 years that other teams haven't.
Yeah, that
Um,
magic.
and we just need to figure out. It's probably something so stupid would figure that like if Kowser could just hit a home run and do like the dumbest thing because everyone says he's like the clown of the team. Maybe something as stupid as that would help us like kind of regain our youthfulness and our love for the game, and we would kind of get that electricity back. I don't know what exactly it would be. Maybe a meeting would help with that. Who would lead the meeting? I don't know. I mean, I guess we've got a few veterans on the squad, but it did kind of seem like last year Kyle Gibson was kind of the main veteran, and I guess this year it would probably be McCann. He seems to be the most well respected, but I don't know. Is he the goofy one who's gonna let this team kind of like find their youthfulness? It's a tough question, and hopefully something goofy happens and we figure it out. This is maybe the worst statistical point ever made in all of baseball podcast history.
No, but I think like so much is made of stats in baseball. But I think you're right about the youthful energy of the team, and there is some value to like some hard fought wins. And it doesn't like that, they had some close wins recently, 4-2, 5-3, 2-0, but it doesn't feel like they've been like hard fought, passionate wins that end with an exclamation point and have everyone excited to come back to the ballpark the next day. Feels like they're just trying to hold on until the end of the game when they get a lead. So it's also like you obviously having blowout wins is great and it's good for your run differential, but some hard fought wins in the next 2 weeks to really force them to confront like, okay, we got to get this done in the runners scoring position. We got to get this done in the bottom of the eighth inning when we're pitching to not have it be like a game where they're up 5-1 and they slowly give away 1 or 2 runs and a couple late innings and win the game. That's not like a satisfying win that you can really sink your teeth into. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. It's the feeling of the team to have to remember who they are and kind of relearn to, I don't want to say relearn to believe in themselves, but it is this very intangible stuff because the numbers are not matching this team's talent level and what we've seen over the course of them earlier in the season. So moving on to our last topic here today, or our second to last topic here today is a quick minor league update. For that, I'm going to swing it over to Daniel.
Thanks, Nikhil. So before we get into some of the newer guys, I wanted to touch on just some of our most highly touted prospects and their promotions and kind of just update you on them. So about 3 weeks ago, our number one prospect, a pretty consensus top 10 prospect in baseball, Samuel Basallo, he was promoted to AAA Norfolk. At the time of his promotion, I'm not sure if this is still the case because there may have been some movement once September call up started and stuff. But he was the youngest player in AAA at the time of his call up. He just turned 20. He's a ripe 20 years old in mid-August. And in Double A, he was very successful. He hit for an 820 OPS, 16 home runs in 106 games. And in Triple A, it's been a bit of a struggle for him, but that's very reasonable to expect because he's facing a higher level of competition. These are guys who are maybe, up and down from the majors, and probably just a lot more experienced pitchers as well. He's got a 584 OPS with 2 home runs and a short 16 game sample size with the Tides. His strikeout rate has gone up 15% and his walk rate has gone down 4%. So certainly this has humbled him to say the very least, and he can certainly take some things into next year's spring training to work on with hopes that maybe he can be up by late season 2025. I know that a lot of O's fans are clamoring for him now with Adley struggles. Don't think that's the best idea, but people have been saying the swing looks like Rafael Devers, which I love that comp. He does have just kind of like a behemoth looking swing with the high finish, which is really cool. And I've seen, I think I saw on Fangraphs that they compare him skills wise to Gary Sanchez, which Gary Sanchez had a couple of very awesome years for the Yankees. So the fact that they think he has that kind of potential game power is super exciting. And then the other guy I wanted to mention was Enrique Bradfield. He was promoted to Double-A Bowie probably about a month ago now, and he's hitting 287 with a 791 OPS in 27 games there. He's got 74 stolen bases between the Ironbirds and the Bay Sox, and actually an encouraging look for Bradfield, which, I'm not the biggest Bradfield fan as far as what his role on the Orioles looks like, but his walk rate jumped above his strikeout rate in this brief Double-A sample size. His strikeout rate has dropped 5% from what it was in Aberdeen since he's been promoted to Bowie. And he doesn't appear to be, a very big strikeout guy. It looks like he's going to be putting a lot of balls in play. So to see he's hitting 287, 791 OPS, legging out these extra base hits, and the strikeout rate has gone down, maybe Bradfield could have a role as more than a fourth outfielder on the major league club.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that is probably where he ends up, but I am quite high on him. I'm quite pleased with his development. I think the Orioles are kind of seeing what they wanted from him in terms of rising relatively quickly through their system and hoping that a college bat like him would be able to get up and be that fourth outfielder on the rookie pay scale pretty quickly. So they have him just on the rookie pay scale and have him arbitration for longer instead of having him wasting time down the minor leagues. If they're not worried too much about his bat, then they don't need to worry about too much about developing his bat and more about making sure that his fielding and his speed and base running are where they want it to be. So yeah, I mean, I think with Basallo, or Basayo, I think that's everyone calling for Adley. It's the overreactions again, because I don't know, what are you going to do? You're just going to bench Adley for an extended period of time and not play him, or then you're going to have Basayo up and play Adley and people are going to complain about it. That just doesn't make sense. I do think that him being here potentially in the major leagues next year is big for Adley, because you're just so much more comfortable giving him more off days and letting him DH and have Basayo play catcher. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I have. Minor league wise, I think that the minor league season is almost over. I'm gonna go check what the standings are for minor league baseball, because it's been kind of funny the last couple of years. The Tides and the Bay Sox have just been, the Tides especially, have just demolished AAA baseball. This year they're 30 and 39. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth in the International League East. And meanwhile, you have the Bowie Bay Sox. I'm looking theirs up right now. Who again have done quite well over the past couple of years, and they're also 30 and 39, which is fourth in the Eastern League Southwest. So it's just kind of funny. Like, it was cool for the minor league teams to win the championships that they did and be really good. It was kind of funny when there were times that the Norfolk team might be able to take on the worst team and the worst major league team in baseball. Maybe sometimes they probably could have taken on the Orioles starting lineup. But now I think it's going to be funny to see the whiplash from fans being like, oh my God, what has happened to our minor league system? Why aren't we so good anymore? It's like, well, all the talent's up in the majors where you've been yelling for it to be for so long. So I just think that's a kind of a funny extension of the minor leagues. It's certainly not a sign of the health of the minor league system or anything like that with all the players they have moving around. But I always just think that's funny that you're the minor league champions for so long, that goes away, and then you're like, why is the minor league so bad? Well, it should be bad. They're not bad, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and star minor league players can almost pop up out of nowhere. And I know that when I continue this, I'm going to talk about some of our highest drafted guys from this year. But I mean, Basayo, for example, was he was relatively highly touted when he was signed as an international free agent, but he was not supposed to be like the top recruit in his class. And I think with us getting more involved in the Dominican ranks, I think that there's as good of a chance as any that one of our guys could, boom and become one of the next big deal prospects. So that's always something to hope for, even when you're picking a little bit lower in the draft, that our influence down in the Dominican can grow. But all of these guys that I'm about to talk about are American college players because that is what we hammered in the draft. And of our top four selections, they have kind of gone in reverse order as far as production's gone. I guess I'll start with our top pick, Vance Honeycutt, who has seen everything that we expected might be a struggle for him has been a struggle for him. In 13 games between Delmarva and Aberdeen, and all these guys had played like 8 games in Delmarva, then got shoved up to Aberdeen because I guess we wanted to keep those younger Dominican players who are like 18 in Delmarva, and we needed the organizational depth in Aberdeen, especially after some of those trades at the deadline. So we're challenging them a little bit late in the season. Honeycutt has a 446 OPS in 13 games, not a single extra base hit or walk, and 11 strikeouts. So he's a free swinger, and he hasn't been making a lot of good contact right now. But I'm sure we had a plan for him, hopefully to get him right when we got him with the whole group of guys in Sarasota in February. And right now we're really just kind of diagnosing what could be what our plan could be for spring training next year. Moving down the line, the middle infielder who we picked next was Griff O'Farrell out of the University of Virginia. He's had a 620 OPS in 20 games between those two levels of A and high A. He has 2 extra base hits. They're both doubles, but an encouraging strikeout to walk rate at least. He has 13 strikeouts to 10 walks and has stolen 2 bases. And I remember when we first did our draft recap that on the broadcast for the draft, they were talking about O'Farrell and said he's kind of like a gritty intangibles type of player. And you're seeing that in his approach right now for sure, with the walks almost matching the strikeouts. And just overall, the extra base hits haven't really been there, which is why his OPS is so low. But looking like, he has a lot of potential to grow, get him on those weighted bats. Mike Elias is always pushing. Who knows what kind of power could come. And then Ethan Anderson, also out of the University of Virginia. He was our 3rd pick in the draft. He's been good so far in the minor leagues. 799 OPS in 19 games. He has 7 extra base hits, a home run, 15 strikeouts to 9 walks, and 6 stolen bases out of a catcher first base drafted player. So some intriguing speed from a college player who's drafted to be kind of a slower position archetype. And our last draft pick, Austin Over, and I believe he was out of Southern California. Not our last draft pick, our last of the group I'm going to talk about. He was our 4th player selected. He's been great. 865 OPS in 21 games between those levels, 9 extra base hits, a home run, 25 Ks to 15 walks. So strikeouts might be up a little bit, but 16 stolen bases. This guy's got some electric speed. And I mean, it looks like we have kind of a new core, hopefully, moving through the minor leagues, a new core of hitters. And hopefully, Honeycutt can figure it out. But the production of Overn and Anderson has certainly been very encouraging.
Yeah, and I think like I was just saying with the minor leagues, like you were saying this new core and kind of seeing it restocked. Now it kind of feels like you're saying that second wave of, you had the first wave of the late the late Duquette and early Elias prospects. Now they're all in the majors, and Mayo and Holiday are kind of on the tail end of that, and then Bradfield is kind of leading this new group. A couple other transactions I just saw come across my Twitter that I don't know if you mentioned. I don't know if you mentioned Dylan Beavers getting promoted to AAA. yesterday. I saw that pop up, and I also saw that the Twins claimed Cole Irvin earlier today. So the Cole Irvin era in Baltimore is over. Not like really doesn't move me one way or the other. I guess he's been more consistent than Trevor Rogers, but at the same time, if we're relying on Cole Irvin in this season from here on out, you're in trouble. You're just not going to get that far anyway. So I think the last thing I want to touch on here, we don't have to get into it too much, is what does this team do in the offseason? What do they need to do in the offseason? Obviously, Burns is like one of the highest things on the list of can they re-sign Corbin Burns? Um, to me, I think they have to remember how this season went. And with pitchers like Means coming back from injury, he injured himself again. Next year, you're going to have Bradish and Wells and Means and Felix coming back from injuries. So you have several guys coming back from major surgeries. To me, it's all about fortifying and giving yourself some options, even if that means signing a guy to a contract and keeping him in AAA for a little while, just in case. I think to me, the biggest thing is not relying on those guys coming back from injury too much. And two, the other thing is just, hoping that you regress positively injury wise with the rest of your team, that you just don't have all these injuries everywhere next year. However, I don't want, oh, we're getting Mountcastle back, we're getting Westberg and Mateo and everyone back to be the, oh, well, we don't need to make additions. We have all these guys coming back, so we're adding them. I don't want that to be the excuse for not going out and trying to actually upgrade at some positions.
I think offensively, I still struggle to see us making a big splash. Unless our biggest splash is like Tony, honestly, just because we do have so many guys that we're still trying to audition in everyday roles who are younger. I mean, I guess maybe an avenue could be trading Mullins and signing a new center fielder. But other than that, I struggle to see where we would even put a new offensive signing, at least to start the season, because I'm sure to kick the season off, we're going to want to give Mayo a shot. If Heston's still here, we're going to want to give him a shot. And that's some corner infield, DH, Heston and Wright also. Westberg's obviously going to play. Holiday's going to play. So there's not a ton of room, I think, for a free agent signing unless someone's going to ride some pine. But pitching, I think especially the bullpen is what's going to need some help. And we had that in mind at the deadline when we went out and we got a few guys. But I mean, this bullpen organizationally looks weak. We don't really have any big prospects that are on the verge that could profile as a bullpen. I mean, McDermott or Povich, I guess, are our closest, options who maybe could be good in a bullpen transition, but I'm sure we'll want to see them as starters too. So I know Felix will be back, but I think this team could use some depth in the pen. And I wouldn't be surprised to see us make a move, especially with Kimbrel's, like 10 or 12 million coming off the books. There could be someone we kind of slot in to replace that money with. And then as far as the big starting pitcher goes, I'd be surprised if we sign Burns. I also, no, I'm a little worried about locking up like 8 years, 300 million of Corbin Burns, just because the strikeouts have dropped. I mean, he's not a strikeout artist this year. So I think, is he going to age gracefully? I don't know. Maybe his peak, like it is for a lot of pitchers, was in those pre-arb years.
Yeah, I think that's a big question about Burns, and at the end of the season, getting a chance to look at all of his peripherals and figuring out, I think it's important to figure out what is it about those strikeouts. Like, why isn't he striking out guys? Is it, is he just pitching in the zone more often? Is he not getting as many whiffs? What is it specifically at the end of the year? And then from there, you can figure out, excuse me, if that's something that you can build on, improve on, and kind of get him back to form, or if it's just the kind of thing that's going to keep deteriorating. I don't know what the rest of the free agency market looks like off the top of my head right now. And we don't need to talk about specific guys. That was a good general overview I wanted to give. So Orioles got 2 weeks left. Depending on how this upcoming week goes, we might try and get in a podcast either right before or right after the Yankees series. We will certainly be back right after the season ends with a couple of podcasts. First will be kind of a regular season recap and review, and the other will be a big playoff preview. So keep an eye out for that. Daniel, anything else to add?
I gotta say it's gonna be a grind. Don't react to any game in the regular season too strongly. We're facing Blake Snell and Logan Webb on the Giants this week. No game's gonna be easy. I just really hope that someone other than Gunnar gets hot this week.
Yeah, I think that's on my wish list too. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me today, and everyone as tuned in as always. Thank you as well. Have a good one.
1